My name is Emily Carter, and only a few months ago, I stood on the stage at the University of Washington, accepting my master's degree in business administration. The auditorium erupted with cheers from classmates and colleagues, their applause wrapping around me like a warm embrace. Yet, despite the celebration, there was an emptiness I couldn't ignore. My parents weren't there. My sister wasn't there. And the ache I felt wasn't just because they missed the ceremony, it was because they never thought I'd make it this far at all. For as long as I can remember, my parents poured all their faith and affection into Ashley, my younger sister. She was the golden child, the one whose every desire was met without hesitation. When she wanted dance lessons, they enrolled her immediately. When she dreamed of a European trip, it was arranged. Her first car? Gifted without question. My life looked very different. I was told early on that life was harsh and sacrifice was necessary. While Ashley's road was smooth and paved for her, mine was an uphill climb. I worked exhausting late-night shifts at a cafe, saving every penny I could to cover tuition. I'll never forget the day I told my parents I had been accepted into an MBA program. My father's response was as cold as it was predictable. "That's great, but don't expect us to help you with the money." I hadn't counted on their financial support, but his indifference still stung. Deep down, I knew they wouldn't bother coming to my graduation either. Then, right after the ceremony, I received a call that changed everything. It was from my grandparents' lawyer, a man named Samuel Pierce. His voice was calm, but his words crashed into me like a tidal wave. "Emily, your grandparents have left their entire estate to you." I froze, not because of the amount, but because for the first time, I truly understood something I had never dared to believe. My grandparents had always trusted me. While my parents' apathy left me feeling invisible, my grandparents had seen my worth. But in a family built on favoritism and broken promises, I knew this inheritance wouldn't go unnoticed. And I had no idea just how ugly things were about to get. Before I go further, make sure to subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Growing up in the Carter household meant constantly fighting for acknowledgement. On the surface, my parents, Richard and Linda, looked like the perfect couple. My dad ran the town's hardware store, and my mom worked at the city library. We lived in a modest two-story home in a small coastal town in Oregon, where gossip spread faster than the tide. To outsiders, we seemed like the ideal family. Behind closed doors, it was a different story. Ashley had always been their star. From my earliest memories, the spotlight was fixed on her, and I learned to stay quiet, blend into the background, and not compete. She never had to worry about how to pay for anything. My parents made sure of that. Meanwhile, I hustled through late-night cafe shifts just to afford textbooks, with their constant mantra echoing in my ears: "Life is tough. Deal with it." I'll never forget my undergraduate graduation. My parents arrived an hour late because Ashley needed a new costume for one of her performances. They took a couple of photos, barely stayed until the ceremony ended, and left. That day hurt, but it still wasn't the worst of it. Years later, when I told my dad about my MBA acceptance, his reaction was a flat, "Good for you. Just don't expect us to pay." I hadn't asked them to, but his words pierced me anyway. Every achievement I earned, being accepted into a competitive program, graduating with honors, was overshadowed by Ashley's effortless success. She was their pride, and I was the afterthought. For years, I felt invisible. But that call from Samuel Pierce changed everything. The $1 million inheritance wasn't just wealth, it was validation. It was proof that someone in my family believed in me, saw my effort, and recognized my worth. I wasn't just the quiet daughter who sacrificed for everyone else's comfort. I was capable. I mattered. But I also knew my family well. Anything valuable became a battlefield, and they wouldn't hesitate to go after what they thought should belong to them. When the inheritance became official, I felt an overwhelming wave of gratitude. But reality hit quickly. This wasn't just about a house and money, it was about standing my ground for once in my life. I knew my parents and Ashley would see this as yet another opportunity to claim what they felt entitled to. They had taken from me for years, but not this time. I immediately contacted Daniel Hart, a seasoned lawyer who had helped me with complex property matters before. Daniel listened carefully as I explained my family history, his expression unreadable. Then he said firmly, "You need to protect this inheritance now. We'll set up an irrevocable trust." Daniel explained it in simple terms. Once the trust was finalized, No one could legally stake a claim to it. The idea of the trust felt like a fortress, an impenetrable shield to safeguard my grandparents' legacy for me alone. I refused to let my family sink their claws into what wasn't theirs. Just imagining my parents or Ashley trying to falsify papers or manipulate the system made my blood boil. But I knew this wasn't only about defending what was mine in the moment, it was about securing my future. For once, I wanted to live a life where I wasn't controlled or guilt-tripped, where I held the power. The process wasn't instant or easy. It took weeks of meticulous meetings and endless paperwork. I spent long days at Daniel's office, combing through each clause to ensure no loophole could be exploited. The property deed was transferred into the trust, utilities were rerouted under an LLC, and every one of my grandparents' old bank accounts was closed and reopened under the trust's name. Through all of this, I stayed silent. I didn't share the news with anyone, not friends, not my parents, and certainly not Ashley. I knew the second they caught wind of what I was doing, they'd try to twist it in their favor. They'd never understand this wasn't greed, it was about protecting the gift left to me by the only people who'd ever truly believed in me. When I signed the last document, I felt something shift inside me. It was the first true step toward reclaiming control over my life, and I silently promised myself I wouldn't let anyone tear that away. Still, I also knew the peace wouldn't last forever. They would find out eventually, and I had to be ready for the storm when it hit. For a while, things were quiet. Those first few months after locking everything into the trust felt almost like a reprieve. I stuck to my usual routine, working in Seattle during the week and driving down to the house on weekends to make sure everything was in order. But in the back of my mind, I knew this calm was temporary. Sure enough, the reckoning came during the holidays. I braced myself for drama around Christmas, but I wasn't prepared for how brazen it would be. That morning, my mother called me with an unfamiliar cheerfulness in her voice. "Emily, we need to talk about the house," she said. "It's time we have a family discussion about what your grandparents left behind. After all, it's important we preserve the legacy." The phrase "preserve the legacy" rang hollow. It sounded rehearsed, as if she were trying to lure me into giving up control. I kept my voice even, refusing to rise to the bait. "I'm busy, Mom. Maybe after the holidays." But she didn't drop it. Later that day, Ashley texted me, vague and casual at first, but with an all too familiar undertone. She asked if I'd considered selling the house and splitting the money. She even tossed in an offhand remark about wanting to open a nail salon. It was clear where this was headed. They wanted a share, and they weren't going to quit until they tried every angle. That evening, the confrontation I had been dreading came to my doorstep, literally. My parents showed up with Ashley in tow, all three of them wearing polite, forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. They walked inside without waiting for an invitation. Before I could even gather my thoughts, Ashley announced with shocking confidence, "The house is in my name now. Mom and Dad already handled the paperwork. You'll need to move out so I can renovate and put it on the market." For a split second, I stood frozen, stunned by the sheer audacity. Her words landed like a slap, and yet they fully expected me to roll over and comply, as I always had before. But I wasn't that Emily anymore. "I've heard what you're saying," I replied calmly, my voice steady. "But no, Ashley. This is my home, and I'm not giving it up." The surprise on their faces was unmistakable. For the first time, I saw the shock of being defied. I was no longer the daughter who obeyed without question. I was ready to fight. The days that followed were tense, but I refused to let them see me shaken. I knew exactly what I needed to do, and it didn't involve screaming matches or letting myself be manipulated into submission. The morning after their uninvited visit, I called Daniel. When I told him what happened, there was no hesitation in his voice. "We'll take care of this," he assured me. "You've done the right thing by standing firm. Now let's make sure they can't lay a finger on what's rightfully yours." In the weeks that followed, I worked closely with Daniel and his associate Sonia. We double-checked every document, plugged every possible loophole, and gathered all necessary proof that the trust was airtight. It wasn't just about defending the house anymore, it was about claiming my independence in every sense. Then the moment I'd been waiting for arrived. One quiet morning, my phone rang. Daniel's voice on the other end was simple and direct. "It's done. The deed is officially in your name." I couldn't stop the small, triumphant smile that spread across my face. This wasn't just a legal victory, It was a personal declaration. Later that day, I drove to my grandparents' house, the place that had always been my true home, and stood on the porch, taking it all in. The house was silent now, filled only with memories, but it was undeniably mine. I slipped the deed from my bag and held it for a long moment. When my parents and Ashley came back, thinking they'd somehow outmaneuvered me, I'd be ready. And when that day came, I imagined their faces as I handed them the papers with a calm smile. "You were right about one thing, Dad," I'd say. "I couldn't afford it, until I could." Standing there, with the ocean waves crashing in the distance, I realized this was about far more than property. The house symbolized everything I'd fought for, every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt. For years, I had twisted myself into knots trying to earn their approval. I'd been the one who sacrificed, who stayed quiet, who never asked for anything. Meanwhile, I watched my parents shower Ashley with love, opportunities, and freedom. But those days were over. They had underestimated me for too long, and now they'd see exactly how wrong they were. As I stood on the porch watching the surf roll in, a profound calm settled over me. This wasn't just a victory over them, it was the beginning of my freedom. I wasn't the daughter who could be controlled or overlooked anymore. I had fought for what mattered, not just the house, but my dignity, my independence, and my peace of mind. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty, I had won.